stops.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's try this fucking again. And as one of my favorite artists said, and as one of my favorite fucking pig face fucking announcement, take two. All right, so this is gonna be a tighter stream, I think. It's gonna be generally about the idea of 15-minute cities, and what could be good about them, what could be bad about them, and in general, what makes them work and not work. For
Mm-hmm.
a libertarian conclusion. I've had both of these people on my stream before, and I'll just let them introduce themselves. The first can be Bigfoot. The second can be, or sorry, the first can be Dead Boy. The second can be Bigfoot.
So yeah, nice to meet y'all again. I'm Dead Boy. I'm gonna be for Jeremy. I'm gonna be writing about urban planning and from a libertarian and anarchist perspective, and why urban design matters when it comes to the conversation of liberty.
And you, Bigfoot.
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Bigfoot, also known as the Anarcho-Appalachian, or Appalachian Anarchist, and honestly, being someone who generally lives not in urban centers, I want urban centers to be as totally supplying to people's needs as possible so that they stay out of my woods and quit hunting me down and trying to get pictures of me and all that. So
There
I
you
look
go.
forward to listening to these guys about 15-minute cities and laughing at people who make up conspiracy theories.
And this should be a fairly good one because, like, I do have my issues with some of the ways that these could be applied, but I also have issues with the way various people apply various things in libertarian circles, to put it in a way that isn't too inflammatory right off the top. I could just say like fake libertarian circles, rightoid circles, but I want to give some of these people the benefit of the doubt. So,
Mm-hmm.
with that in mind, let's just get started with the precept. I'll give everybody their chance to talk about what 15-minute cities mean to them from what they've heard.
Yeah. So who wants to go first?
You go.
All right. So, to my understanding, from what I've heard about the 15-minute cities concept, like at least in the buzzword term, is what a lot of people believe is happening or want to believe is the plan for it. And maybe
Shit.
for certain actors, this might be true. The WEF, like, I don't assume good intentions with anything they do. So, I mean, that's fair, right? But when they talk about, like, having these cities that are highly walkable, highly bikeable, with like mixed use, or like where like there's businesses and amenities close by for people in their neighborhoods, for some reason we've had this thing where there are certain people who sometimes they have a right-wing bent, sometimes they're probably middle of the road Democrats, whatever, but they start using this, and politicians use this to make them fall for it every time. There's a war on cars, cars are freedom, this type of talk, where they use that type of talk and saying that they want to ban cars, or they're saying, even though I haven't seen any evidence of it, that the reason they want to do this is so they can like have these 15-minute cities so they can lock people in with surveillance checkpoints to control who goes where, what, and where. And that may be possible, that they would try to apply it in a way that would make such a thing easy. But one of the things that I have with the way that people talk about it that just kind of like, I guess, amuses me is I gotta wonder how many people know why our cities are the way that they are now. Because
Right.
if they think that walkable cities is a tool of control, must not know that this current development where we have parking lot, highway expansion, just like, crony supports for box stores, and largely just 99% car-centric city development patterns, that was the tool for control. Like when the progressive reformers, or we can use air quotes for progressive reformers, like from that time, were like Robert Moses or Ebenezer Howard, or I think his name was Richard Le Corbusier. When they were conceptualizing these ideas, a lot of it was not only one, because they had a hatred for cities, but two, they thought cities needed to be planned from the top down for basically, it was part of the same eugenics agenda that existed in 1900. It was like it reaching its highest conclusion. And while they'll probably, and then on top of that, like them thinking, basically they saw cities as nothing more than a tool for traffic going in, traffic going out. So after World War II, when they had a quote unquote surplus of money that they can spend, they didn't, but they said they did. And when the GI Bill came in order to create that illusion for people who are just coming back from the war, all of a sudden we're getting car-centric suburbs, closing down or putting onerous regulations on street cars and to make them less viable, pushing different groups to the outskirts of the city by bulldozing their homes to make these highways.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things that they did to create what we have now, and also by proxy creating a housing crisis and putting a lot of cities in debt, because they were trying to control who gets to have the road, who gets to be on the road, and not only that, to line the pockets of General Motors, who they also had to deal with to try to get people to buy more cars. And it's like, the messed up part of that is the reason why I'm bringing this up, even so, like it's relevant, is I have to wonder if the reason why so many have resistance to this is because if they don't know the history, and because what people conceptualize as the American dream is so tied to the 50s and 60s and the mythologizing of it as this golden era, that they go against it because of that nostalgia that's been baked into their psyche, even for people who aren't born during that time.
For sure.
Because I mean, it's even the era that all of the MAGA campaigns, whether it was Reagan's MAGA campaign, whether it's Trump's, is to harken back to this so-called golden age.
What about you, Bigfoot? What you got?
Mouthful of food. I'm sorry. Let me let you go first.
All right. So generally speaking, like I can see where that's coming from. I can also, because like I am #conspiracy hedgehog, like I can see like where the people are coming from with regards to certain criticisms. I'll say one thing, like in terms of my sort of acceptance of favor in this regard, and then I'll say some stuff that might be criticisms of it, and we can just sort of bounce ideas off. But like my general idea of the 15-minute city in a positive application is, I don't mind running. I like running. It makes me feel great. I don't mind going for long walks. But there are a variety of people with, for instance, mobility issues, with money issues, with et cetera, and those issues mean that it's hard for them to get to certain parts of major metropolitan areas because they don't have they don't have access to the same sorts of transpo or some shit like that. And the general vibe is like, you grow the cities and you increase people's dependence on various industrial complexes, because they suddenly have to like be affiliated with like your transport, your public transportation. They can't just walk to their job or the store or whatever easily. They got to use cars, and then based on both of those things, a lot of the space in the area's got to be parking lots or roads or back alleys in order to like let the cars ferry shit in. It increases dependence on like long-term trade and travel rather than like localism and supporting local small businesses. So it enables the globalist state and its protectionism over its trade routes and shit. And it's one of those things where it's like, the more you think about it, the more it's like, it might be good to have things more concentrated, more local. And one of the things that I think is valuable to like consider for anybody out there who is skeptical is that like when it comes down to it, the cities have not only harmed everybody, but they've also harmed you in terms of urban sprawl. Like, I used to watch a shit ton of Alex Jones. Um, and one of the things that I watched when I started, actually the first Alex Jones thing that I saw, somebody gave me an MP4 copy of his documentary Endgame: Blueprint for Global Enslavement, and that was huge in my forming years, my mentality and bullshit, because that meant that like I could see a lot of stuff that otherwise I would not have been able to about this issue. And like one of the things that I saw is they described that the one of the reasons that they have so much public lands and so many public roads is because now they have a shit ton of things that they can control in the public. And they just showed this map with all these spidering orange lines that were the roads and shit. Um, and those roads are all controlled by the state. And when I started to see it from that perspective and hear the words "prison planet" coming from Alex Jones, I was like, haha, yes, this actually makes hella sense. This is the grid. This is a net. This is what they're using to control us. And they're, these are all like cells. All of our houses, all of our businesses, whatever, they're just cells, and we get certain amounts of yard time in this prison. And so every one of these little orange lines and spider cracking bullshit is just like hallways for the wardens and guards to monitor. And when I thought of it in those terms, I was like, haha, I fucking hate roads now. I hate urban sprawl. I hate urban sprawl, and I've grown to hate it more, even though I've sort of distanced myself from that Alex Jones part of my life in a variety of ways for a variety of reasons. Like, I've kept that shit because it's real. It's very real. And so the more concentrated you make it, the less likely that kind of thing is. And so there's that element of it. However, and I'll say this and then I'll pass it off to Bigfoot and then Dead Boy after that. However, I can see from their perspective, people like, ironically, Alex Jones and a variety of other people, I can see from their perspective how having 15-minute cities could be just like, we've got, control over this tight-knit area. The tighter knit it is, and the more that, like, the less you have to walk, the more they might be like, well, you don't have to go, so we'll just restrict your travel between districts if you don't do what we want. And we'll also include a whole lot of surveillance and bullshit in these 15-minute cities so that these utopias could be highly controlled. So, like, there's a bunch of factors here. Like, I do think that there is some genuine concern, not necessarily even about the 15-minute city concept, just like accessibility and shit, but like who controls the cities. Like, because it's a reasonable thought. It's sort of like when I bring up like party politics and shit. Like, I say, well, you might have great intentions, but are you going to be in charge? Probably not. And so there is some concern that I think might be valid. I'll pass it to Bigfoot to say his piece, and then back to Deadboy to address Tharng's.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking about this, and something occurs to me that I think not a lot of people think of whenever they're making that cars equals freedom claim.
Mm-hmm.
That's this. All right. So in the past, humans had a general natural tendency to self-organize in a way that made sure that their kids didn't get run down in the street by that fast-moving, heavy, multiple tons toting horse and buggy that was pulling in that new industrial equipment to build up, say, Boston or New York or whatever, back in the early or the late 1800s, the early 1900s, that sort of era, before the era of cars, but immediately preceding it. People generally understood how to have a high traffic, road versus the pedestrian streets, where if you had a horse and buggy, you went slow, you went careful, and you knew that you were on someone else's appropriate street. Like you should have been on the road, but if you had to go to, like, say, your specific house, you'd take the slow way down the street, making sure to avoid all the pedestrians that have full right of way, because that is a street where they live. as we move forward, we get the development of the car, which could have been a great thing because ultimately a car is better than horse and buggy. But the difference is that now we have licensure to drive, which means that every single person who needs a car needs the approval of the state that lets you use it. So the more infrastructure that's built up around cars, the more infrastructure that's built up around people who have to have state approval in order to live their lives. You can't go to the grocery store when it's, 30 minutes away by car and you've had your license revoked because of one thing or another, right?
Right.
So basically what's happening is, especially in cities, because in cities it's already difficult to get around in a car, much more so if you're not legally allowed to have one. So it's like the more car-based infrastructure they build, the more infrastructure they have unilateral control of, not even because it's a public road, but because driving on it is a privilege issued by the state, as opposed to buggies and other locomotion systems. And I feel like people who so I'm speaking as someone who grew up in the country, and
Same.
I see
Same.
cars as as a mode of freedom, because I remember when I got my first car and I was able to go somewhere that wasn't just my neighbor's house. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have anywhere close that I could walk to pretty much my entire childhood. So when I first got access to vehicle, it did mean freedom, but it only meant freedom in an incremental way because I was a teenager. As an adult, I can see that cars mean so much less freedom than any other mode of transport because they are heavily and completely regulated. And like, if at any point the road pirates want to pull you over or even crash your car because you refuse to stop, they can't. Like, it's not like a cop can run up to you and punch you in the face because you didn't stop walking. I mean, I say that with a caveat that's totally possible, but much less likely. But they will absolutely run you off the road if they think that you're defying their authority. So the idea that 15-minute cities is some sort of trap, I can see it, like Jeremy says, I can see where it's coming from. But at the same time, cars are themselves freedom traps, where it seems like freedom until you're married to it, and it's the only way to get to live life.
Yeah, and real quick, before Dead Boy goes, because, just real quick. Minty, hello. Yeah, feel free to pop in, chat more. Definitely welcome. And Chris Bennett says, my longtime libertarian friend Michael Hewitt Wilson talks about transportation for poor people in bigger cities. Talk about gentrification as well. We will talk about gentrification as well. And if Michael Hewitt Wilson wants to come on and also talk about some of this stuff, feel free to let him know that we're live. That sounds interesting. And also feel free to add me on Facebook so that you can connect with me in a variety of ways and talk places. And Minty says, I'm not well versed on this topic, so it's nice to learn about it. Good to hear. So with that in mind, Dead Boy, responses.
So both I wanted to add an addendum to both of your points because I agree with them. Is yes, like one of the good things about having a highly walkable or 15-minute, as the phrase is, city, is that you can set up a city that accommodates multimodal transport. Like one of the things that, not saying necessarily do it the way they did it, but like Amsterdam, one of the reasons it gets a lot of praise by people interested in urban planning is because it has a city design that is almost where almost 60+% of the population are cyclists, but then there's people who have wheelchairs, people who have bikes, people who walk, and people who have cars are all sharing the streets. And they used to have highway expansion like crazy up until about 20 years ago, whenever they started reversing this to get back to this point. And then also, yes, as you were saying too, like Appalachian, yes, it's kind of hard for me to take seriously the cars completely equal freedom whenever there's more government intervention in your life. And then on top of that, if you have to pay for a rather expensive mode of transportation just to navigate where you live, it almost becomes an unofficial tax, an off-the-record tax.
Yeah,
to pay for it.
And just something to think about in that regard for anybody out there, sort of still cagey about this. The more the more roads they make, the more territory they have to seize, the more tax money they have to take, the more they have to mine, the more they have to spread, the more they have to encroach, the more they have to do, like, eminent domain transfers and asset forfeiture.
Mhm.
And, like, everything that makes you less free is enabled by urban sprawl. And that is, like, urban sprawl is the opposite of 15-minute cities. So, and like, for all these people who are like, oh, we want traditionalism, we want the traditional life, and like, modernity is bad, and, like, return with a V, because I'm stupid and I think that makes me look smart. All these people who are like that, those people should benefit from the knowledge that what they're doing, is they're supporting the opposite of their freedom by their own admission. Because if traditionalism is freedom, then it's not freedom to be anti-traditional and have massive sprawl instead of, like, the common person having the same access as previous societies have had to their citizens. And so, like, to me, this isn't a chance for right wingers to recognize some inconsistencies if they're willing to.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because, yeah, it's like when we talk about turning back the clock to a simpler time or a better time, why does it have to stop at the 50s and 60s?
Maybe
Why
because
does it
they
have
like maybe because they like using fire hydrants for another purpose. Sorry, go ahead.
Because it's like, yeah, like, go, like, for instance, one of the things that I sometimes do whenever I see, like, there's this one channel, I think it's called NAS, like, capital NASS, where they have these videos of, like, recolored, remastered videos of, like, the different cities and the people walking in them and everything from
Yep.
the Roaring '20s, Warren G's era, to the 1910s, all across the world. And this 15-minute city model, in every single one of those videos from that time period, you're seeing pedestrians, trams, cars, all sharing the streets. All of these different businesses near where people live. Like, they're showing all of this stuff in these clips.
Yep.
So it's like, uh, how are we going to... Oh, we shouldn't reflexively dismiss a concept that's basically built around the way cities were built for thousands of years prior to the state having a say in it.
And
So sorry, yeah. One thing that I think is funny about the fetishization of the 1950s and 60s is that if you actually go back and you look at the people and who they were and what they were saying at that time, all of that, I guess, like, I don't know if Brave New World was being used, because I'm pretty sure that was subverted from an earlier positive meaning. But anyway, like the circa that time period, this is the golden age mindset, was in itself a reference to a previous golden age of America, the late 1800s, when we had the freest markets in the world and the freest people in the world, and pretty much like actual, like, as close as we got to actual, individual liberty-based society in a true sense that still technically had a government, but is what it is. We haven't gotten perfect yet. They were referencing that time period because of the massive amount of wealth growth and the massive increase in the standard of living for everyone in the entire country based off of that wealth growth. And they were all basically like, "Oh yeah, no, we're doing it again. This is the second boom. Like, this is the Roaring '20s, the onward to the '50s, and I guess it started to wear off at the '60s as we transitioned into the hippie era." But, like, they were referencing themselves something else. So when people 60s is like a good old time, a golden age, a return to tradition, they're referencing in itself a culture of reference, a culture that is only trying to pretend to be the greatness that once existed. Because in reality, the 50s and 60s were a boom based off of pretty much the first real hands-off, let's just inflate and go crazy by the Fed after the war. Because had to keep all of this war-based infrastructure running because they needed to make 1 million guns a day yesterday, and today the war's over. So what are we going to make today? Well, let's make 1 million cars. And so then General Motors said, well, we can't sell 1 million cars. And the United States government said, oh, no, it's fine. We'll just make it so that if they want to sell a car, they have to buy your entire year's inventory first. And then you guys don't have to worry about your sales because the car salesmen have to worry about their sales. And so that created an entire industry of car salesmen and car culture. And every car salesman needed to sell his cars above all. And that's generally how they got their shady, pop culture reference of a car, seedy car salesman. That comes from the fact that they are being shafted. They have to buy the inventory. If they want to sell a single Chrysler, they have to buy every Chrysler of that kind. And then they have to move that inventory or they hit the loss because Chrysler's not going to feel it. Chrysler just sold their entire inventory on day one. That's the law. And that law was in place because they wanted to keep that manufacturing capability in case they needed to have a World War III with China.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. This is all accurate. And it's like, yeah, and it was all an illusion with heavy central planning. Heavy central planning, heavy abuse of eminent domain to destroy businesses, communities, pushing, like minorities into these public housing projects that were not well maintained at all. Like it was like the state actors, the second they saw the minorities enter the public housing, they just was like, nope, don't pay it any attention. That playground, let it decay, all of this. And then we then go to Euclidean zoning as well, where they separate everything from everything, where we have that, where it's commercial zoning, residential zoning, and then industrial, which I think is like for farms and stuff.
You know what goes in hand with that zoning issue?
Yeah, what's up?
The outlawing of the two oldest professions that aren't prostitution, cooking and cooking. Most cities, the poor people in those cities from pretty much the 1850s forward existed if they, couldn't get their own job. Like if they couldn't have a job working for someone else, they generally existed as either cooks with carts, like they would just cook stuff on the street and sell it to passersby, or they existed as pickers, where they would just go through public accessible garbage and find stuff that isn't garbage and that people would want, and then resell it in the same kind of carts on the street. And just as they were banning everyone's ability to cross the street and wherever they wanted to, and like, oh, well, this is all car territory and stuff, they also just so happen to zone out everything that you need close to you so that it has to be far away. And they outlawed the ability for people to have like private stores that are just, operated out of carts, and private food that is just operated out of carts and stuff. They destroyed all that so that you had to go somewhere else.
Oh,
you didn't even have to.
And now you've got the it's so fucking infuriating when I see a bunch of free market motherfuckers angry at things like, I saw this it's so many people who were just like, oh, look at New York now. And they were going, like, the camera was going by a bunch of, like, Hispanic people selling fruit out of fruit carts. Shut the fuck up! They didn't do shit to you, and if you actually advocate a free market and, what you call capitalism, which is the free market, when that's not all capitalism is, if you're going to say that you value a free market, then do not oppose the market when it is being free and does not require your fucking permission, Karen.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry, that fucking got my cock off, so go ahead.
Yeah, the occupational licensing thing is direct correlation to a lot of this stuff too, because it's like the people who in the town square would have been selling their burgers, selling their candy, selling their hot dogs, et cetera, without a license or a permit anyway. Like, yeah, like those people, it's not possible to do that anymore. And then on top of that, with like the corporations and the other businesses hating competition and being able to use restrictions to keep them out of their area by no anti-soliciting laws, quote unquote. Yeah, like this is another way that the way the city is structured is not structured to develop community wealth in any real way at all anymore.
No, it's structured to isolate and make more efficient factory workers for GM. Because that's
and I can't find it right now, but I criticized this chick the other month. She identified as an investigative reporter, and the investigative report that she was doing at the moment was this guy who was making like mixed drinks with like squirt and tequila And he would just move to a different place when the feds caught on to his unregistered business. And I'm like, what did you investigate? You took a video of him. He was doing it out in the open. There's no fucking investigation. You just don't like the fact that somebody's selling something that you don't want them to sell, probably because they're brown and you don't like that. Shut the fuck up, bitch.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, yeah, a lot of these laws enable Karen culture way too much. Because then we can even like talk about how it intersects with parental rights to an extent, in the sense of like, because like one of these problems that we have now, where it's like even led to like free range parenting laws having to be passed, is because like these days, especially at least with suburbanites, it seems, is when they see a kid like in a playground without an adult being present, they're immediately calling the cops. And when they call the cops, a lot of times the parent will get punished, where if they, you know, the license they shouldn't have even had to be a teacher will even get removed, or for whatever profession they have will get taken away because their kid was in the park for a few minutes alone, or in one case where a woman, like her 2 kids were tired, so she let them sleep in the car as she was getting a birthday cake. And then someone called the cops and she ended up losing her license for a profession. And it's like, with the type of city design we have, I would argue that maybe if we allowed, like, you know, the sidewalk culture to pass as well, maybe more people, because there'd be more eyes on the street at all times, which is what used to be done before we started spreading everything apart.
Yeah.
I would hope that they wouldn't need to feel like, oh my God, this kid's alone for 5 minutes. Maybe they're going to get kidnapped in 2 minutes. Let me call the cops.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I found another one, by the way, where Annika Olsen tried to give money to a median street vendor who was like selling flowers, and she was charged with refusing to comply and resisting because she stopped her car near the median by police who stopped her on the other side of the median, thus blocking both sides of the median longer than a flower purchase would take. And if they weren't investigating a hardworking migrant saleswoman inside a Constitution-free zone designed to control migration within 100 miles of the state's borders, this wouldn't have been a problem, just to transactions. You know?
Yep.
Yeah. Or even, don't even get me started on the cops in the New York subway harassing migrants who were selling churros and stuff without a license.
Or
Oh
just the
no.
homeless people.
Yeah, homeless people. Yeah.
So I have a point to make about the homeless people issue and how the roads relate to it. So, you know, we can't cook. You have to drive if you want to go anywhere. But what happens if you want to like just you know, all right, I'm not wanted here. Let me just walk my ass out of the city and go find somewhere else to live. Well, all the nature got claimed by the government, called a national park, and even though it's public land, no one in the public is allowed to use it. You can't go live there. They'll kick your tents out. You know, like they took the only other place that people used to go if they couldn't make it in any city on earth was the woods. They would just go and they would make their own, you know, homestead or whatever, however they could. But now even that option has been stolen from the homeless. They don't even have the option of leaving.
Yep, and they all say it's because of health and safety. Like, shut up. No, it's not.
Or they say, oh, we have to preserve all of those woods for a future generation, even though, okay, so we've had the national forest since Teddy Roosevelt. Which future generation are we saving them for?
Yeah, I know.
There are people starving today.
Yeah, and then it's like with this suburban expansion, one of the other problems that you can argue, or maybe you can argue that it is indeed a problem, is that they have no problem, like for all the talk about environmentalism, they have no problem with displacing animals from their natural habitat to build more suburbs.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They don't care about the animal population, which, dude, if anybody ever even mentions environmentalism, I just point out the fact that the U.S. government, in I think it was 2020, stopped publishing the United States Army's pollution reports because it was too bad looking. The United States alone produces as much pollution as the 17th most polluting country on Earth. So, like, just 1 million dudes managed to put out more than countries on Earth.
Yeah, and if people don't want, you know, like let's say, you know, regular suburbanites, if they don't want to find themselves having an unnecessary interaction with wildlife when they're driving a car, having these habitats destroyed is going to do the opposite of help fix that problem.
Yeah, and just like, so 3 things actually, haha, because that's actually a good lead in to another point that I've made on this channel before. But like, before we get into that, hello Kish, and Minty says free market proponents when the market is free, anger. Yeah, it'd be that. And so many such cases. Additionally, some free market components of the Libertarian Party and various other circles of rightoids, where they literally ignore the reason for migrant flow, and then just pretend that it's because of the welfare state, because they're sucking off the Koch brothers or something. And the general vibe that I want to convey is that it's not the welfare state that is the reason that these people are coming here. It's because it's very similar to what you just said. Their home was destroyed, and now they're forced into a place where these people say they don't want them. And instead of being compassionate to that and opposing the industrial complexes that are destroying these people's homes and saying that, maybe we should compensate them there so that they can stay there, they're like, no, fuck them. That's life. Life sucks. War, whatever. And oftentimes justifies their disdain for the common person's experience with racism and saying, these are subhumans and shit like that. And it's like, no, they're fucking not. And the general vibe, like, that I want to convey is, if you don't fuck people's shit up, if you don't fuck something's shit up, it won't need to come to where it is less fucked. And, like I've made the point before, in terms of borders, if your house gets fucked up by a cop, you will rightly demand compensation. You will rightly demand that the state compensate you. And I think that there are very few people who would say that that's like an unreasonable demand, and those people are usually fascists. So the general vibe that I want to, like, if that's the case, if we're allowed to seek compensation from those who have destroyed our homes, and it's not a problem to get money from those people or services or whatever, and you wouldn't begrudge somebody who had their home destroyed by a cop, why not the world police or one of the corporations protected by the world police in form of the troops, the industrial complexes, the fucking, like, the West has destroyed a significant amount of other people's shit. And then when they come here saying, well, at least give me some work to do so that I can earn my living and send some emoluments back to my or is that what they're called? I don't think that's what they're called. There's a word that starts with E, but whatever. The term for sending money back to your home country, at least let me do that and let me earn my keep here. That is like something that they oppose because a lot of these people are just allegedly free market because it bolsters their right-wing garbage, and their right-wing garbage is also bolstered by a significant amount of racism, which is why a significant amount of these free market people supported removal of the anti-bigotry plank in the Libertarian Party platform. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, and then some of that is also, it's built on, even though, like, as you should if you're a free marketer, you shouldn't believe in the fixed pie fallacy. I don't understand believing in the fixed pie fallacy when it comes to immigration, where you believe the protectionist lie that they're going to, quote unquote, take the jobs. But if you don't want there to be finite jobs that are just, quote unquote, takeable to that extent, getting rid of a lot of the occupational licensing and making it cheaper to run businesses means that when those immigrants come here, they can just start a taco truck, then build it up into something else or whatever other venture that they want without having to go to the state. But what you also very good about what you pointed out is that even something that, like when you talk about city to urban planning and housing and stuff, a lot of the times it presents itself as a local, quote unquote, issue, an issue for local politics to handle. But as you've pointed out, it has an upstream effect from things that you would consider national issues like foreign policy.
Absolutely.
It definitely has an upstream effect when it comes to that, whether it's the migrants or the bears. If you don't want bears in your trash can, don't destroy their habitats.
Exactly.
You got some, Dad, Bigfoot?
I'm sorry, my kids have been distracting me for the
Not
past,
at all
like,
a problem.
10. I've been like tuning in and out, but I'm trying to pay attention. So let's see. So the immigration issue is something that I always find interesting when it comes to people who are, for some reason, really anti-city, but also anti-people coming in, because it's like, you can be afraid of immigrants, but being afraid of immigrants is in a sense, like, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. It's a I don't want to use egoism terms, but I have to here. It's a spook. It's a spook because immigrants are not real. Like you said with the fallacy of like the what'd you say?
The fixed pie fallacy.
Yeah, the fixed pie fallacy. There's another fallacy completely involved, which is I guess like the single body fallacy, where it's like there is any real tie between you and another physical geographical location that people are entering arbitrarily from one side to the other. It's like if someone illegally enters Texas, how does that affect me, a man in the Southeast? Not in the slightest. So like it's not like they're even going to come here to take my job. And so being, anti-immigration like that is silly on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like you don't think the people in the city should be able to just live their lives with, comfortable access to the things that they want. Why? Like, do you want them to leave and come to where you live? You apparently don't want anyone to come to where you live. So why are you against them making cities more palatable for the people who do live there? You see what I mean?
100%. And on top of that, too, to my understanding, now I could be potentially wrong on this, but a lot of anti-immigration laws, weren't they largely just lobbied for by not so progressive labor unions of their day, the 30s and 40s, because they were trying to restrict competition on every front?
There is just delicious footage of Bernie Sanders being openly anti-immigration because of the unionist platform back in the 80s. And you're absolutely right. The unions are basically they were the original torch carriers for anti-immigration. The unions have been for a long time because anyone who sees themselves being outcompeted and finds themselves in a statist mindset will immediately try to run to the daddy state in order to eliminate whatever form of competition that they can. And 90% of the time in the past, when people were being outcompeted, it was because people from another place knew how to do that better. And they showed up here to do it in a better circumstance. And so, like, the unionists back in, it always comes back to General Motors, the unions that managed to get a hold of those large car companies actively hated immigration because they knew that the lower rates those people were willing to work at, because comparatively it was like a fortune to them, those lower rates they work at would completely subvert the unionist cause of basically keeping General Motors alive on life support forever off government funds, because we might have another war one day.
Yeah. And then even, and it's crazy even with that, to an extent, it seems like, Toyota, Honda, Suzuki, all of these Japan brands still have more relevance with their cars than General Motors today. Even despite all the special kickbacks they get.
That's literally what happens. Like, I don't understand why the state. Yeah, like, look, let me just be real here for a second. If I wanted to be a tyrant, I would be interested in making my society the most productive society possible so that I could live well. I don't understand why states continually believe that if they subsidize a market, they make it more efficient, because that's never happened in the history of ever. And literally just every fucking time you read about one industry or another from any time period, anywhere, being subsidized by that government, like the next paragraph is, and they got outcompeted in like 10 years and were massively inefficient and could barely make were constantly being propped up by tax dollars and stuff like that. It's like, gee, I wonder why. It's almost when you take the incentive for improvement away from the people with the stuff in their hands, they quit improving.
Yep. Because then, of course, that raises the question. Do they actually care about efficiency, or is efficiency just an excuse for control?
Yeah, well, it is. It goes with the car. So what are the big three industries that the government regulates in the modern day?
I mean, for one, it will definitely be cars. The second would definitely be healthcare.
Well,
And
healthcare is the fourth. Healthcare
okay,
is the newest to this party. But go ahead. What's your other two guesses?
my other two guesses, I mean, presumably they have a lot of control over, I mean, well, of course we know they control education from the top down,
So
if we consider it an industry.
I would say that that's a state function as opposed to an industry. Like
Yeah.
education is primarily a family thing historically. Anyway, my point.
Probably like energy, pharmaceuticals, maybe commerce, finance.
Uh, so basically, farming,
Ah,
autos,
okay.
and energy. So like oil. So why does the government prioritize oil, farming, and automotive industry? Because automotive industries can be retooled to make weapons, and
Mm-hmm.
farming can be retooled to field armies, and oil can be retooled to fuel armies.
Yep.
That's literally that's why those are the three most heavily regulated industries. And then now we have healthcare because healthcare can be used to keep armies alive, and we have education because education can be used to breed new soldiers and stuff like that. Like the state has never quit being aggressive. They just stopped needing to show it openly, but they're still doing the same grift they always have been. They're trying to gain control of those industries that allows them to wage war. In the 1700s, guess what the first thing the Britons did whenever they managed to get a grip on an industry in America? What was the first industry they took over? Shipping timber.
True.
Over shipping timber because they needed the Navy in order to maintain their colony and to maintain their global dominance. Every single time a state takes over an industry, it's almost always from a war footing, and no matter what they tell you. The British in the early 1900s took over the shipping industry, the private ferry shipping industry. They made it illegal to make your ships not able to be converted into warships. And they made basically they have the right to at any point convert any private shipping into a public warship. It's just the same story over and over and over. And so you see states trying to latch on to things like cars and cities and zoning. Like, why do you think they want to zone people? It's to make sure that they keep the populace under control so they can keep their workers working in those factories. They don't want riots, but they don't want people who are smart enough to not have to work in a factory, and they want to make sure these factories stay in business. So they make sure everybody's separated and poor and desperate and needing everything either given to them by the state or barely provided by the job that they're effectively forced to take.
Now, three things responding to that, because I want to push back by adding two. The first thing is that they are as openly aggressive as ever. Just they keep most of it over there, wherever there is, mostly the global south. They are more violent than ever and more expansionist. This is the biggest empire the world has ever seen, is the West. But like that, it bolsters your point because it's less that they're not violent, and it's more that they do it over there and they make people here complacent, greedy, and isolated. And they create a Pavlovian conditioning system through the schools that means that if it's not directly them affected, they don't give a fucking shit what happens, and they'll continue to support the machine as it runs, passively or actively, and crush anybody who attempts significant change. And so the school system is necessary to these, and it's why it also includes something like driver's ed, because they've got to plug you into the system immediately, and they've also got to plug you into the industrial society and its industrial complexes. And to finish that part off, I'll just say, ain't it funny how the factory's doors close around the time when the school doors close, around the time that 100,000 jail cells open up to greet you like the Reaper. It's all connected.
Yeah, it really is. And to even rope it in, for instance, the way urban planners would say that to some extent, cities and towns should embody what what that area values, what that particular society values. And ever since the states took it over, they've shown with their design that they value the military military power more than anything, with the way that they've designed the cities. And to even also expand to it, even with there's even a ripple effect on health, whether physical or mental, with the way that this stuff has happened. Because normally, at least in days past, when you Like, for one, we have the agriculture industry being incentivized to make bullshit food. Let's just call it what it is. It's sugar, corn, wheat, and soy.
Yeah.
In a walkable environment, you at least have a chance to walk off or bike off the bullshit you eat on the way to and fro work. Now, you sit in a car, you spend tons of hours in traffic after leaving a job you don't want to be at to get home with not enough time to yourself to begin with. So it's like, for one, we're not only doing that, but then the more we suburbanize the area, the more we pushed everything apart. They've made it, I won't say that they're the sole cause, but it's made it way too easy for people to live sedentary lives, live secluded lives, because there's no close by third place to hang out at. There's no easy, convenient place for kids to play outside. So you got people isolating themselves in their homes, getting onto internet communities and using that to supplement what people used to do whenever they went outside and interacted with the people in their neighborhoods.
And like, what I'll say to that real quick, because this is a spiel I go on. This is cheap as fuck. It's like $15. You can train your grip with this up to 150 kilos. It's got like, you know, the grippy ball. It's got like, and I'm not going to show the brand name unless I already have, but because I'm not getting paid for this. But like, it's got one of these like hand stretchers. It's got all this shit. It's got like this little sort of xylophone kind of so that you can like get your fingers all like personally strengthened. I have this by my desk. Even if you're like chained to a desk, you can still get some manner of fitness. And then if you've got a door, then you've got a home gym in terms of this bullshit that I have constantly next to my desk, which is a door gym / resistance band setup. And I constantly use these and my new pull-up bar and a variety of other things. Like I literally have a Joe Rogan style mace that I use in order to work out. And I'm just saying, everybody out there, you have no excuse. None. You've probably got exactly what you need. And if you've got like, you know, $20, you can get some of this stuff that I talked about right now. Like, not all of it, but like, if you've got $20, you can get some of it. If you got $100, you can get like all of the stuff that I just talked about and more. I got some of my fitness stuff that I didn't even show at a Goodwill outlet. Like, go get something, no matter what your city condition is, and get fit, because we do not have the fucking time, energy, space. We like the crackdown, the authoritarianism is coming. It's coming, y'all.
I've got Jeremy. You know why you need to get in shape? Because in the words of Aesop Rock, the revolution will not have jazz hands.
Yes. Yeah.
And in terms of fitness, you know, in the words of Sonic the Hedgehog, if you have time to worry, then run.
Go fast.
Yep. Because yes, not only that, but then also just having more people being integrated into their communities, whether it's hanging out at a bar, hanging out at the neighborhood park, hanging out at the city park, etc., where, you know, like, people are more socially connected. It becomes a lot more difficult to divide people with CNN's bullshit.
Absolutely. I wanted to point out something that I thought was interesting related to that. Like, we don't have public spaces or third places to be anymore or anything. Not a lot of people realize that basically the only reason why the American Revolution managed to pull off in the first place was because of the existence of public coffee houses, where the revolutionary leaders and the original Sons of Liberty, like the actual anarchist Sons of Liberty as they started, would meet and discuss anti-government policy in a way that would not be overheard, because no British person wanted to be inside a coffee house. So they had a way to meet with each other. And it's like, where are you going to meet now? Every single internet forum is a honeypot. Every single person who encourages revolution is a Fed. And there's nothing that you can do about it, because it's not like you can even walk somewhere to talk to someone in person. I just, you know, besides what we're doing now, it's like, you can't organize because every organization is going to be assumed to be a federal operation, because you can't organically create in-person communities to organize.
Yeah, and like the other
part of that stuff.
The other like just to say, even if you did organize in a coffee house, it's in a coffee house. And the fact that it's in a coffee house means that you're in a city and it's full of a bunch of like statist garbage, like, you know, surveillance apparatuses. It's got
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
it's got fucking it's got like shot spotters, it's got facial recognition cameras, it's got Wi-Fi opportunity zones, it's got stingrays, it's got people walking by with Bluetooth skimmers that don't even work for the government and some who do. It's got no freedom, nothing. You're done.
Yeah.
Yep, which is why every day I pray for the great solar event.
Yeah, and like every tiny little bit that they build in, you know, to strengthen and enhance their infrastructure and to aid in their gradual urban sprawl, every single fucking thing that they do in that regard, that is all of it, more surveillance, more control. So you're not getting less control with smaller cities, you're just getting bigger control areas.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry. I think I cut you off, Bigfoot. If I did, I apologize.
I was trying to give it to you. Actually, I had said my piece in that. I I have a tendency to be a one-trick pony when it comes to my constant references to the 17, 18, and early 1900s because
Well,
I'm just that kind of autist.
no, but like it's fine because like people who don't know history are fucked, or sorry,
Hmm.
doomed to repeat it. If I want to be boomer, like
You want a real doom to repeat it? The very first liberty advocates in the colonies were Massachusetts, and the reason they wanted to have liberty was so they could have their own oppressive theocracy. So you know, the right has been using free speech and liberty shit since 1650, my man, and way earlier.
yep,
Oh yeah, because especially because back then being right wing meant being pro monarchy, pro status quo, and being left wing, you were the ones against it. That's why the seating arrangement in France, Pierre Joseph Proudhon and Frederick Bastiat sat on the left, the statists sat on the right.
Yeah, I mean, this was predating wings in general. This was I think like the it was I'm trying to remember. It was 16. I think it was 1640 in Massachusetts, and it was literally just they wanted to have their Puritan theocracy, and the British government said, "Dude, we literally don't do that anymore. You can have whatever religion you want. They're British citizens." And Massachusetts said, "All right, well, come over here and fight me then." And that's basically how the very first attempts at revolution started in the Americas. Was a bunch of rightoids trying to have their own little religious party. But I just think it's funny, it just keeps repeating itself. I'm tired of rerun episodes, man. I'm tired of seeing the religious nut jobs, give liberty a bad name.
and Minty, that's correct. And Dead Boy, let's then, given the reasonable disdain for the right, let's get into some of that. With the Republican and Democrat arms both being segregationist, evil pieces of shit. Talk about redlining.
Yes, where that's literally that to me, that was mainly the true purpose of urban renewal in the 50s and 60s. Because which communities did they choose to bulldoze the most? Minority communities and, of course, poor communities.
Hey, that's not
Already.
nice. Sometimes they bombed them. This is the anniversary of the move bombing.
Yeah, that's true too. When it comes to their bombs and their bulldozers, they've decided they don't need to be as targeted anymore.
Yeah, right? Go ahead, though. Sorry.
Then,
I have to be at least a little
people...
bit of a cunt. If I'm not, people won't think this is me.
Hey, man. Give them what they ask for.
All right.
So, yeah, so we do that. And then, yes, the exclusionary zoning policies ended up basically having the result of pushing the minorities and the poor people to the outskirts of the city, mainly to basically to have like the suburbs and all of these things be like essentially upper class white people spaces in a way by doing that, where the people who had the schools that were nearby to walk in the metropolitan areas were not the people who were getting bulldozed out of their place and then pushed to an apartment that's just right across a freaking highway, on top of a highway where they have to have a car to move by. And So yeah, we have the redlining when it comes to the exclusionary zoning. Of course, we know a lot of the occupational licensing laws and the minimum wage laws and things like the economic restrictions that had an impact at the same time. Their original targets, when you read a lot of the rhetoric of the first bills passed for that, was specifically to target minorities, target women, and to try to basically, because without a minimum wage, they're getting priced out of the workforce. The union
Yep.
started pushing for those things to where they wouldn't have to compete with what they called "quote unquote" colored labor. But then there's the other component too, where you don't even see boarding homes anymore because of the fact that with the way that their zoning laws are, they're practically illegal to build in most places. Or how we've gone with that fixation of the detached single family home to where, unlike in some European countries or whatever, where you can have in the same neighborhood single family homes, a duplex, and a boarding home near each other, you can't do that anymore because when they were bulldozing those places, they were bulldozing the boarding homes, bulldozing the duplexes, etc., which they were calling it "quote unquote" blight, and saying that there were slums and that there was "quote unquote" blight, the blighted neighborhoods, when really
Imagine
they were just multi-generational homes a lot of the times. Sorry?
I just said, imagine just trying to exist being called a fucking blight. How insulting. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I
And
know.
and that's another thing that's valuable to bring up. A lot of the same rightoids who are big fans of this urban sprawl car bullshit is there'd be fucking, oh, that's a flow of migrants across the border, treating them as an amorphous fluid rather than unique individuals, thus betraying their sensibilities as individualists, and proving that they are in fact collectivists because they will collectivize people based on their approach from the other side of an arbitrary line, and maybe even their skin color and the way their voice do be sounding, though. It's dumb shit, it's evil, it's garbage, and I hate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just like one of the things that you pointed out with a lot of the environmentalist reforms, quote unquote, that statists want to push, where you're saying that the humans are the carbon that they want to remove, I'm more than convinced that during urban renewal, minorities and poor people were the blight they wanted to remove from the neighborhoods.
Oh,
that was the actual blight.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
No, absolutely.
And it's like, you really think you're going to tell me in one moment that the state is keeping us divided on racial lines, and then tell me that segregation is actually kind of okay at some points, and then tell me that apartheid, I'm talking like the right-of libertarians right now, that apartheid was a better situation than that which followed apartheid, and you're going to tell me all this shit, and then at the end of the day, you're going to tell me that the state's trying to divide us based on race. Yeah, and you're helping them do it. You're helping them, and you're helping the people who were Malthusian then. It's not like the racism makes it less Malthusian. It makes it easier to be Malthusian because you have a justifying ideology for it. You fucking cunt.
Yeah. And that's yet another situation of not understanding what, the thing that you're idolizing and quote unquote wanting back, not understanding what it took to make that happen in the first place, and if whether or not what was sold to you in those lovely sitcoms of time of yesteryear was actually real to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like Leave It to Beaver, for instance. Like, if people think that life was really like Leave It to Beaver, I don't know what to tell them.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute joke. And like I said earlier, it is basically just nostalgia for a time that never existed, because that time in itself was trying to have nostalgia for a time that did exist, but was destroyed by the very state trying to idolize it. The United States government wanted to sell you the American dream, even though they already sold out the American dream to the Federal Reserve 20 years before.
Yep. And then using the same policies that created a bad housing bubble in Japan in around the similar time frame. And it's funny. It's a little bit of a note, but it's funny. Where because of that, it enabled greedy real estate speculators in Japan so bad that it inspired Akira Toriyama to create Frieza, Dragon Ball Z's most known villain, because he saw them as the worst people ever.
Actually, So as a side note, I just remembered this. I remember telling my friend, a good partner of mine, and someone I ended up converting into an anarchist. I remember telling him how I had an epiphany at one point about why every single Martin Luther King Boulevard drive in every city I've ever been into has also been
Sorry.
And I realized that the reason is because all of those street names got changed during the urban renewal bullshit. And so
Yes.
those projects that were created and then left to rot were literally created at the exact same time those politicians were trying to pretend to not be racist by naming everything after the guy that the FBI assassinated a few years before.
We improved
It's
the
Yep.
absolute joke.
we improved the aesthetics. That means you can't complain anymore. Certainly don't rebel, or we'll fucking shoot you.
We named you know what? Why are you still being uppity? It's like, dude, like, you barely even mask the loathing of those people, and yet you're pretending like you're doing something for them.
And hey, just as a reference to a stream we did not too long ago, 2 streams actually. First stream was on Kareem's channel. For those of you who've been following for a bit, you know Kareem pretty well. Good guy from the Mises Caucus, slowly but surely becoming more and more left friendly. And generally, yeah. And generally, he had a stream where we went over woke stuff. And the next stream we went over woke stuff was on my channel, both of which are, I think, pretty good streams. And the first stream, to be very clear, I went over the origins of the word woke, and that applies here. It applies here because if you're woke, you get it. Applies to the vibe of, hey, we named a street after you. We put a mural up of the guy we killed. That means that you can't be upset about it anymore or acknowledge anything that's in the undercurrent of how things are. And certainly don't get intersectional. That's toxic or something. Haha.
Yeah.
Don't stand up and recognize the intersection of oppression between you and your fellow person on the ground. Fight with each other. Be part of that division. Enable us with racism.
I can't remember. Was Malcolm X killed before or after MLK?
He was killed before, but not long before.
It was around a similar time.
Yeah.
I couldn't. It was like a Tupac and Biggie situation. I couldn't remember which one went first.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, and it's like...
Oh, and real quick, just
and then,
go. Sorry, actually, go.
You know, finish your thought, man. It's cool.
All I was gonna say is anybody who thinks Martin Luther King wasn't also armed is a bitch and doesn't know history. They should look up the report of the reporter who went into his house and said it was, quote, like an arsenal, and said he had trouble finding a place to sit down that didn't have a gun. So no.
I mean, he's a blooded American Alabama man. Like,
with a posse up in this bitch.
I'm still waiting on those CIA documents.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting on those. But yeah. And then you think about, so yeah, like when it comes to all of this, like that is one of the more frustrating things about this conversation too, is that, you know, like we've talked about all of the different things that like that matters to a city. What does a city say about this, whether it's economics, whether it's racial politics, whether it's health, mental health, whether it's physical health, whether it's, you know, people with, you know, disabilities and stuff like that. Like what does a city, how does a city reflect our societal value towards these people and towards these other issues we care about? Yeah. And it's like, so yeah, we have that. And one of the more frustrating things is because of stuff like that war on cars rhetoric, because of the instant reflex from the right to dismiss the 15-minute city because it's a WEF and by transitive property. The left likes it, therefore that type of thing is the only people who aren't hardcore urban planner enthusiasts that are willing to talk about this have been people on the more leftward side of things. And they're on the more statist leftward side of things, but they're still right on this, you know? Because like one of the channels that I watch, even though I definitely know he doesn't say it, but it's obvious that he's more left, is channels like Not Just Bikes. He covers this stuff quite a bit. Adam Something, who I don't like very much, he covers this stuff a bit, and then I find myself agreeing with him on these issues. And I also do think that it would do a lot of good for Liberty folks to talk about the city and what it should mean to people more as well, because of all of the different effects that come with a city. Because I mean, it's where we live. It's not just a place for streets and buildings.
For sure. Oh, and real quick, Minty says, rightoid libertarians love screaming about liberty, but when migrants come for a better life, they suddenly want the government to do something about it. Accurate. I just checked chat. I don't know what the message is you retracted, but if you do want to talk, can do that. Anyway, so that. Okay, just I guess then. Let's make a hypothetical. We'll start with Bigfoot. Set up your ideal 15-minute city.
My ideal 15-minute city is a giant plastic cage that keep all the idiots away from my woods. But no, so my ideal 15-minute city would be basically a humane and sane version of that one. What was it? The Dimwu Wall City or something like that. The one that was effectively a stateless society. My ideal 15-minute city would be a city based on the idea of you should be able to do everything that you want to do in your life in this area with people you choose to associate with as long as you can reach it, you can build on it, as you can take whatever risks you want. You can take the responsibility for those risks. If things that you do hurt people around you, you're responsible for them, accountability culture and stuff like that. But the freedom to enterprise as you wish within this area, building up and around and, creating communities of voluntary and happy associates. With effectively only cars only being allowed on the edges as a way to go to and fro from the 15-minute area. I say allowed, but obviously that would be a community choice thing. They can have as many cars in that place as they want, but ideally they wouldn't need the cars because they have the people, which is the only thing the cars are meant to take you to.
Yo, much of Spokane is fucking parking lots. I saw somebody take an aerial picture of the downtown area, and this aerial picture, I'll post it somewhere. But this aerial picture, they took it and then they drew a fucking bullshit on the fucking parking lots, and it's just most of it is parking lots. Most of it ain't business. Most of it ain't fucking good shit. It's just here's where you put your car. And it's if you really want competitive enterprise, if you really want to say that we don't have a population issue, maybe use the spaces that you have for your populations fucking better, instead of just making more and more shit that you can spread out with.
Yes, correct. We have to actually use land efficiently. If you want a productive society, you want productive streets, just having a giant sized parking lot with maybe a Walmart or a Home Depot in the middle is not that at all.
Yeah.
Yep.
But there's also a Costco and a Jack in the Box. Yeah.
Well, in the effort
corporate parks.
In the effort of building the perfect 15-minute city, maybe one day, if I can ever get my mental illnesses straight enough for long enough to actually act on any of my ideas, I will finally make the omni-generator that I've been working on for years, at least as an idea form, so that people can generate their own power in a localized home setting with basically solar energy, but using a Stirling engine. And 15-minute cities won't even have to be connected to any sort of grid. They can just provide their own power based off of in-home generators that produce no pollution and require no oil.
Good stuff.
Yep.
I'll definitely let us know if that gets going. But people will support that on Kickstarter or whatever.
Yes.
I want it so bad, but I just can't. I can't marshal my energies. I got 15 different pans in the oven, and all of them are just grease. They don't have anything in them. I can't cook a damn thing. But
also, Earth Nerd Hello says, "Sidiots, I'm stealing that, and you can't even park in most of them." About Spokane.
What'd you say, Jeremy?
Earth Nerd says, "Sidiots, LMAO, I'm stealing that," and also says, "And you can't even park in most of them." Referencing the parking spaces.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're not even allowed to park in most of them. Oh my God, that's so true. That's so true. 90% of parking, you personally, as a random person, are not allowed to park in.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Nope.
It's well, motherfucker, what's it all here for? Because the people it's supposed to be for, they work 3 days a week as a lawyer or some shit is bullshit.
And
yeah, I know.
And like when a friend of mine visited Spokane, like I don't know, a fucking year ago, um, time is fucky. I don't actually remember specifically, but it was fucking snow. So basically, when he was here last, we were trying to look for parking, and we eventually just landed so that we could go. I forget what do, but we just landed on we're gonna park in this alleyway temporarily. Go, you know, like walk around for a bit. I forget why. It doesn't matter. The point is that like this alley was like literally owned by the business, but we just sort of like put our car there for a bit because there wasn't specifically a sign that said don't. I don't think. But it was the first place that we could find that we didn't have to be like a customer or an employee or whatever in order to be there. And it's like
Yeah.
the visitor did not want to risk access to his rental vehicle being restricted by it being towed away. So, yeah, like it's one of those things where it's like the city makes being in the city restrictive. It doesn't need to be.
And I feel like
Yeah.
they could learn a lot from places like Alexandropolis. Those people, like, I don't know how. I've never been in a city that I've wanted to stay in until I visited that one because it was just like it was naturally grown. You could tell that everything in the city had a purpose because someone was using it. There was no wasted space. There was no wasted anything because everything grew naturally as and when it was needed. And yeah, it didn't look like a nice ordered, grid of streets, and it wasn't always easy to get around. But that didn't matter to the people who live there because they know where to go. They know what to do because they live there. It matters to them. And why else would you have a city other than for the people who live there?
Well, for the
Yes.
mega corporations, banks, and industrial complexes.
Yeah, that
Oh,
seems to be it.
God, Jesus. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Where's my coat? Where's my coat?
Yeah, right? Yeah, you won't somebody think of the banks and industrial complex? Anyway.
The capital.
and General Motors. What about General Motors?
Yeah, and that's the other half of it. Is that like a lot of these fucking free market cucks are actually not free market, and they thrive on the mentality created by an unfree market. So it's like what they actually like mean is they're that temporarily embarrassed millionaire that quote talks about. Like they will fight to the death to defend a society that crushes them and hates them, and then demands their conformity to it, and like they'll do that and then claim that it's about supporting freedom because to them, because their minds have been bought by right-wing funded and affiliated think tanks and organizations, they'll just be like, this is what the free market is, this is what capitalism is the free market, and therefore this is what we need to defend from them commies and shit like that. And like they'll say that but like they're saying that because their minds are fundamentally warped by the self-same people who don't want you to think about how unfree, fundamentally slavish they're making the markets. And they do that because like they have to. If you thought for a moment about like the source of Fred Koch's money being Nazi oil and the fact that he runs a lot of these right-wing organizations through funding strings, you would panic about Nazism like I do. If you thought for a moment... Go.
I was just going to say, I wonder if the emphasis on car life has anything to do with Koch's oil. Just out of curiosity,
It partly does. Not just Koch's though, like the Willis, I think, brothers, like they're the ones who fund a shit ton of right-wing media organizations, including PragerU and the Daily Wire, which also both got Donors Trust motherfuckers writing and speaking for them. Donors Trust is Koch. Yeah. Those are two oil organizations working together to fund right-wing messaging. And a lot of these right-wing messaging organizations are also connected to things like Institute for Humane Studies, Americans for Prosperity, Young Americans for Liberty, anything for liberty, honestly. And you're just like, meh. All these organizations, they're just like all funded by oligarchs, all funded by fascists, all funded, and like you realize this, and it's sort of like, you know what? Maybe this is fascism, not free markets.
Yeah, because I mean, fascism is by definition a merger of corporate and state power. So yeah, it is.
Did you? I mean, that's what the rerun episode is on this topic, though.
What is it?
I swear, it's like hearing an echo. I think it was 16 to 1700s British mercantilism,
Mhm.
had almost the exact same rhetoric, the almost exact same language, almost the exact same kind of people, the same kind of situation. Like, and what did they do back then? Oh, well, they didn't have a military-industrial complex. They just had good old-fashioned colonialism, just bold-faced, no mask off. Yeah, we're going over there to take those savages shit. And we're doing it because we can't compete with the people who are already in business. So we're just going to steal raw materials from the people who can't defend themselves so that we can stay competitive against people who don't control their industries.
Yeah.
Mercantilism, I believe Rothbard originally said that there's no such thing as mercantilism economic thought, because every single mercantilist paper is simply an apologia about why their special interests should be protected. Does that
Yep.
sound familiar?
Yeah, and that kind of thing is what Bossier called universal plunder, where you basically give everybody a reason to invest in the state, basically give everyone a stake in expansion of state power, and where
Yeah.
they're just infinitely aggressing against one another in the name of being protected from another group, and whether it's another business or what other demographic you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's also what both Bakunin and Rothbard agreed were state capitalism, a thing that a lot of these
Yep.
free market motherfuckers don't want to talk about for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because that would be super inconvenient.
Communism!
Yeah.
Pinko!
Yeah, exactly. And what's crazy is I'm willing to bet you for any of those people who like panic like this, like these supposed free market guys who they say free market, but they really mean quote unquote pro business, because that's what their political leaders tell them is a free market, is cronyist pro business policies,
Pro big
quote unquote.
business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is I'm willing to bet you if you gave them a game like City Skyline or one of the Sim cities, they would probably, if they won the game, build a city similar to these walkable cities and everything. Because at least everybody knows, if nothing else, they're aesthetically pleasing. But then they never understand why
Yeah,
they
no,
value
literally,
these cities.
I have to say this. I played SimCity so much as a kid, SimCity 2000 specifically, and one of
Mhm.
my absolute favorite challenges was building what's called the Plateau City, which is basically you make a field of ocean, you make a single plateau in the middle of the ocean that is like, maybe a tenth or a fifth of the play space, and then
Mhm.
that's what you have to work with. You don't have any roads in or out, and you have to just cope and make a city that everybody can live in that is that small. And it just made 15-minute cities, and they were clean, and everybody fucking loved them.
Yep. Yep. If you play a city simulator, that's going to be like the first city you make when you get the opportunity to do it. It's like, okay, so you can acknowledge the value of a city like that when you play a game like that, but then not understand why it has appeal to begin with beyond just looking pretty. Because yeah, it's amazing too that where we have some people who defend that status quo, and even on that shallow level, this type of policy just makes our cities ugly.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Minty
Well,
and
I mean, I have a hard time saying that there's a pretty city out there, that at least in America.
Minty
But,
says Lamau rightoids love talking about Dems being bought out by big corporations. They are, but they themselves are literally funded by entities like the Koch brothers. Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so two things. First off, what I will say is that Spokane is fucking awesome compared to where I'm from. And it would be different maybe if the rural area I'm from, because I come from dirt road, desert, rural ass fucking like Methville, California. And like you go out there to cook your meth or to beat your kids or wife where nobody is going to hear you scream or your meth lab explode. And like there's very little infrastructure, there's very little people, there's very little anything. There's a whole lot of cacti, a whole lot of broken glass, a whole lot of drug paraphernalia you could crunch under your foot if you're. So that's why I didn't walk barefoot. But the point is that like the place I'm from sucked asshole, and I didn't want to live there, and I called it Dirt Jail because it sucked asshole. And like I like it here comparatively, and I just it was a great decision to move. I've not bought any booze since I was up here because I haven't felt like I've needed it. You
Yeah.
know, like it's a good thing to be like, but it's also like partly part of the reason is there are elements of that here. And there are certain places, like you can go to Hilliard here, for instance.
Hmm.
Hilliard is this nice little sub-community that has a shit ton of things really local. It has like a little bakery outlet. It has like fresh fruits and vegetables store. It has little
Hmm.
grocery stores. It has, and you get to the point where it's like, you know, this little sub-community, you can get everything there, and that's what gives it its charm. Same thing with downtown.
Yeah.
Even though
And
downtown is greasy as fuck and full of parking lots, at the very least, it has a whole lot of shit. Same with my suburban area. I've got so many little mom and pop stores in my fucking area here, and that makes it nice, you know? And it's like when people are going to ignore that which makes a city better and then tell me that the city has to be more and more parking lots, and less of the areas that I like to climb and run in, they're building a road next to another road
yeah.
where I am. Like they're building a road that is like designed to cut down traffic on a parallel fucking road.
Just one more lane, bro. Just one more lane. I swear. Just one more lane. We'll be
Yeah.
good.
Hey,
Yeah.
but
That's
this isn't just one more lane. They're building a full-on freeway, and they're cutting up hillsides. They're tearing down trees. They're polluting the river. They're doing all this shit, and they're doing it because the road that is like there's a road that runs like this, and then they're putting another road that runs like this. They needed that
yeah.
because of traffic congestion. They can't just build more shit closer in and stop districting areas, allow for mixed use districts and shit like that. They can't do that.
Yeah.
Build a freeway and cut a gash through more of this shit. We need room for more concrete.
Yeah, I know. Concrete asphalt.
Yeah.
God, there isn't enough roads, Jeremy. I don't understand what you don't get about this. So you need
Yeah.
at least one more.
I
Like,
really
like that's not,
Yeah, and I really liked the hills and the areas where they cut this bitch up. I used to hang out in trees over there and like next
no,
to
I
the
will.
river.
Now I will say, and this is probably the only positive thing I'll say about car culture. My 10-year-old self would like to comment that whenever they cut through like a big hill or mountain and you see exposed rock face, that's really cool.
Okay. Um,
That's so cool to look at. But that's it. That's all I got to say. Everything else sucks.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
and then the second
And it's
thing
like,
is
yeah, like,
real quick.
sorry, what were you gonna say?
Dead Boy. Like I'm not gonna say anything after this, but like I mean more later. We didn't get to
Cool.
your ideal 15-minute city setup, so after you say this thing you're going to say, we can get to that. Take as much time as you need.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is because I think I've talked about this with I might have mentioned it to y'all before as well around Christmas time. Is that like you notice around the holiday time, people always watch these Lifetime movies where they'll be in this little Christmas village or this little small town where everything is close by, and they like fight off the corporate efforts to like destroy their town. It's like y'all love those types of stories, at least on Hallmark, and but then again the don't make the connection.
So it's almost like we need to be more Norman Rockwell and less Lou Rockwell. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
And then as for my preferred design of what a 15-minute city or walkable city will look like. Now, obviously, I would like for it to all just basically come through free market, spontaneous order and everything. But as far as how it would look to me, in a lot of ways, it would look like Amsterdam. With the way that the multimodal transport looks, with the way that like in the pedestrian space, you have not only, you know, the brick and mortar buildings, but you have the street vendors there and everything. You have the little nice parks and sidewalks where the kids are playing outside. You have the nice urban green spaces that keep the animals in their habitats. You have all of that stuff basically together as a complex adaptive system, you know, kind of the way a forest works, an ecosystem, an organic ecosystem, not a complicated but uniform and boring structure like we have now.
Yeah, and And rightoids are always talking about, especially torchy rightoids. I'm going to start using the term torchy a lot because it's good.
That is 100%.
What?
It's so good.
Yeah.
I've been using it all.
I made this term. It's basically like a libertarian version of a tanky or a Nazi. It's like the person who is an apologist for the worst shit in the libertarian circles.
Party pieces of shit.
Yeah, and you could even make the case that it's not even just for parties, and it's just for like everybody who claims to be a libertarian. You could call them a torchy if they're an apologist for libertarian bullshit, but like especially party.
Yeah. Another good one I've heard that is like, I guess another way to say it is a liberty vulture. Just someone who uses liberty to gain for themselves and only themselves.
Yeah.
Most Republican politicians.
Yeah.
Well, not all of them.
And like, a lot of these people will claim that the left is entitled, and all this stuff, like they feel entitled to the things that they ask for in the public spaces and shit. And it's like, then they will turn around and these torchies will say, no, but actually Rothbard was right about unleashing the cops on bums and vagrants. And like those people will also be bolstered by like people like Dave Smith saying militarize the border, and those people will also be bolstered by people like Toad saying that you should also unleash the cops on bicyclists who use the sidewalks.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Jesus
yes, because we need to penalize cyclists. Like the mode of transportation has the least state intervention. Yeah, let's put state intervention on that mode of transportation.
Yep.
The cheapest mode of transportation that aren't your shoes.
Yeah. And like
I felt
go.
Oh, sorry.
Go.
I was say that I felt so hurt when I first learned about Rothbard's Unleash the Police comments, because I had idolized the man up until that point, listening to Ethics of Liberty and other true, young Rothbard anarchist literature and stuff like that. And I wasn't really familiar with his later life. And honestly, and I hate to say this, but I feel like if Rothbard had grown up in a non-metropolitan area, he would have never said that dumb shit. Because I just like he was too city-brained to imagine a world where the homeless didn't have to be homeless, because he had seen them his entire life, and he just assumed they were gonna be a part of any society, but they don't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because and then when you read like what the paleo strategies endgame was, it was to present libertarianism in a way that would appeal to suburbanites, basically.
Mm-hmm. NIMBYers.
Yes. The not in my backyard. We want affordable housing, just not next to us type of people.
I heard somebody complaining about YIMBYs, and I was like, why are you complaining about the people who are like, yeah, no, absolutely, I agree with this policy and would love to have it in my own backyard? And someone was like, they don't understand the effects of it. They're literally agreeing to have the effects of it, you idiot.
Yes, absolutely. And then it's like, that's where like, one of the other things that I won't say that the majority of libertarians get it wrong, but these Cato type libertarians get it wrong when they talk about zoning laws and things like that, is they'll try to present it as zoning law allowing people to control who gets, like they get to have control over their neighborhoods instead of the state. But it's like, for one, that's not true. Two, you're controlling where other people live. So it's like, how is this liberatory?
Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, just a side note, can we start using cokeheads? Like, coke?
Yeah, that works for me.
Cokeheads.
I love that one.
Yeah.
And it's funny you also call them torchies, because like also like the freaking the cronyism that comes with bulldozing places to put a Torchy's tacos in someone's neighborhood, but not allowing anything else.
Yeah.
It sounds like it mirrors that type of thought.
Minty.
You can also reference the tiki torch bastards.
Yeah.
Liberty advocates.
And a lot of these torchies are sympathetic to those torchies, so works out.
Yep.
Like Chris Cantwell was definitely a Libertarian Party member who was really bad for the Libertarian Party and made excuses for its worst elements. But Minty says, what's a NIMBY? It's an acronym that means not in my backyard. It's basically like Karens who try to police everything about their neighborhood.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why it's difficult to build new houses. Ugh.
Yeah,
it's especially used for people who are like, oh, we need more prisons or we need more power stations, but not in my backyard. Like we need homeless accommodations, but I'm not gonna let a homeless, like a welfare place exist in my neighborhood. No, it needs to be over there where I don't have to see it. That's what I've seen them needs to be primarily meaning.
Yeah. And then they get to control how their neighbors use their property, or, oh, you can't use your house for a restaurant or a bar or something. Not if we don't agree with it. And or if, let's say you have like one of those little, like, you can turn part of your house into like a secondary unit. You can't even do that without the government's permission now because of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like HOA Karens are the worst.
Yeah, and like, oh man, it's like that the first verse to "Don't Get Captured" by Run the Jewels, where it's like, but you don't give a fuck. That's them though. Till a peasant puts a pistol in your window.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Or even like whether you like Eminem's music or not, and The Way I Am, he said, where he said, oh, look where it's at, middle America. Now it's a tragedy. Now it's so sad to see an upperclassity having this happening.
Yeah. And like it's like the same mentality as the next verse. Good day from the house of the haunted. Get a job, get a house, get a coffin. Don't stray from the path, remain where you're at, that maximizes our profit.
Yeah. Yeah, and then here's the thing that's funny too, like our current like city structure, like they care so much about the control, they don't care that cities are going in debt because of the way that they do this crap. Because a lot of this redlining and stuff is basically it's interesting. Racism's leftovers has basically screwed over everybody. Like
yeah.
Because by doing that and by making it difficult to build, it only benefits the developers to do these reforms you're saying. And it's like, really? Because, oh yeah, God forbid the people who actually build the homes want to say in how they're built.
And just because the woke streams happened, and I'm still catching some flack about some stuff involving that. I might as well also say that intersectionality is necessary, and if you don't believe so, I question anything libertarian or anarchist you believe. Because this is a place where we can recognize intersectional oppression, and if you would not like us to intersect, then what you're essentially asking us to do is not observe the oppression where it is, and not be woke to it. Because if you're woke, you get it. And that means to me that you're bought by the propaganda machine, and you would rather us not be any more aware of it than we already could be.
Yeah, and I will say briefly, it is amusing that Right Towards used the word red pill in the same way, basically. But yeah, because it's like how a term like intersectionality, how it's applied, should be more concerning to them than just the general premise, which if you extend that general premise to its natural conclusion, it promotes more individualism.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you extend that premise to its natural conclusion. And then, yeah, like, I mean, we're literally, if there's anything to talk about intersections, pardon the pun, it's about what a city is and what a city does for people.
Oh my God, I will not pardon that pun. Get out of here.
But at the same time, where the intersections are is chosen very chiefly to benefit the rich, where the overpasses are because cars are going to fall off on poor people's houses, where the industrial districts are districted because those can be over near the poor people so that they're the ones breathing the fumes and getting all the polluted water. And, like, it's always fucking this. It's never going to be like the hyper rich areas that are like breathing toxic gas from the local paper mill. It's never going to be the fucking high. It makes me so angry. Fucking so angry.
Oh yeah, because it goes to show you just how, like, when you learn all this stuff, the way you look at a city will definitely change a whole bunch. Because when you know that there's people controlling the way a city is built, their agenda and their motives matter when it comes to that.
As I've always said,
sorry, continue.
So I just say, as I've always said, when it comes to these cities and how they're becoming prisons, humans, especially I feel like I guess, only two place living that people have whenever they live in a very metropolitan area, where everyone they see is a stranger and will remain so. That no one says anything. Everyone's always looking either down at their phones or, at something, just like at the next thing, or they're talking to somebody on the phone, but they're never present in reality in front of the other people around them. It just creates this isolation where
Yep.
you become more and more desensitized to the concept of a stranger until eventually strangers are barely even human to you, and the homeless definitely aren't.
Yep.
Yep. We even have you can even be fined and or locked up for even providing aid to them in some of these areas because it's health and safety, OSHA says.
And fucking, you want to talk strangers? Great song by Bring Me the Horizon. We're just a room full of strangers looking for something to save us. Alone together, we're dying to live and we're living to die.
Yeah, very
Yep.
true. And the more people get to know their neighbors or have an incentive to know their neighbors, or it becomes, just viable because, these car-centric suburbs aren't exactly doing it in that front, is if you have these mixed-use types of structures that you mentioned where there's businesses with eyes on the street both during the daytimes and nighttime hours. There are eyes on the street for the adults that come home from work when the kids are playing outside. They're the ones that are always at home watching the street. You're also allowing communities to self-police, to be their own security whenever you're doing that. Never mind the health benefits of kids being able to actually walk to and from school instead of going on a state-funded bus.
Yeah. Or, just because I'm spamming lyrics right now, I'll just say the beginning of Friendly Fascism. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the end of the 20th century and the arrival of friendly fascism. Regrettably, millions will die as before, but just think of the tremendous selection and savings you'll gain. Of course, the loss of freedom and democracy are tragedies, I know, but consider the entertainment value contained within. And to remind you, it is you, the people, who have mandated this course of our fate, so please come with me.
Ah, yes, of course, a gilded cage.
Yep. It's like,
I mean,
it's a reference to a book. It's very good.
of course. Yeah, and then it sounds like it's referencing some of the themes touched on in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where he surmised that the way that the authoritarians are going to control people is by using entertainment, drugs, sex, and promiscuity to keep them distracted.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I'm just going to read this also because it's fucking great and it's from the same song. You'll learn to like what you must do. If you resist, you are oppressed. You are told who to fight and win by Bush the Nazi fascist friend. Alienating technology wipes out our sense of community. Millions will die just like before. We disconnect and start the war. We make life a commodity. We turn animals into machines. Kindler, gentler slaughterhouse. Big business and big government distract us with entertainment. They manufacture our consent while we destroy the environment.
Yep. This is true.
It's a great song. It's fucking Consolidated. I might not agree with all of their politics, with all of their ideas, but like if you want banging anti-fascist funk, Consolidated is that. Anyway.
Yeah, if nothing else, they make very good observations, if nothing else, because that's kind of like we could probably do a whole stream just talking about our experience with the 9/11 fallout, whether as a school kid or whatever else you were doing at that time. But yeah, like that was them just bringing their heels in even deeper compared to when Woodrow Wilson did his crap in the World War One, and when fascist Delano Roosevelt did even worse during World War Two.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like even with that, because with the housing policies, he's also guilty of using the New Deal in a way that basically legalized segregated housing. So those types have a part to play in why things are the way that they are too.
Very much so. But yeah, I think we've done a relatively good job of, I don't know, there are problems potentially with 15-minute cities, like there are problems with every other statist version of society. Like,
yep.
So in an anarchist context, you could like have a 15-minute city that operated in an anarchist fashion. The idea that you can't is a failure of imagination, as far as I'm concerned. What, Bigfoot?
Yep.
Oh, I was just going to say my only problem with 15-minute cities is the presumption that you can plan them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like with everything, central planning is going to always be the problem.
Yep. Central planning is simply preemptive fossilization of temporarily useful structures.
Yep.
Natural planning allows for the changing to modern circumstance that allows for someone to go, man, nobody wants to live in this area anymore. I'm just going to convert this house to a store with no one's permission. And no one's permission is required. But with central planning, you're fossilizing a plan that you start out with, and even if that plan is good in the beginning, give it a couple years, it's gonna fucking suck. Things change.
That's why I don't like large scale development, because with the way that they've set it up, it's you build a whole bunch of new houses. They all have one in this one neighborhood. There's a static price range, and instead of allowing newer things that are cheaper to allow varying price ranges in neighborhoods, they just hammer the shit all down and start off fresh. Or whenever they want to call themselves clean up an impoverished neighborhood, it's destroying them down and replacing them with luxury homes they know the population can't afford there.
Mm-hmm.
Gentrification.
I'm all up. But are we about to wrap up, Jeremy?
Yeah, we will be. I wanted to give people an opportunity to say some final thoughts on this subject, and we'll be probably talking about more of these subjects at a later date as well. So feel free to throw stuff up that you that like any of the viewers that you wanted us to talk about that we didn't. But yeah, any final thoughts from either of you? Anything you want to plug?
Sure. Now, I don't know about necessarily plugging other than, your site, which I'll be writing at in the future.
Anarch Unity,
but Anarch Unity is we have to start. I do think that we as both anarchists and libertarians have to start getting into the conversation of what the significance of a city and or town or village is, especially a city, and what it should mean for the people living in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've already covered all of the different effects, and even though we didn't talk about it much, we kind of talked about something related to it. Even with the loneliness epidemic, as well as the economic situations, as well as this being a product of the fallout of discriminatory policies of times past and times present, if we're keeping it real.
Always do.
All of these things, we have to start having this conversation. That way we can, if nothing, even if we can't pressure the state actors to change things, maybe y'all can even start factoring how to basically make black market cities in our agorism strategies. Start working with what they call small tactical urbanists, who will literally make their own highway cutoffs and things like that to basically make their city into a walkable city, or a city that's more in line with what they value compared to the sprawling location that they're having. Because if those two teams can combine, we have a vision for what we want our future to look like. Whether it's, especially for our city, because do we really want to leave behind, for whether it's Generation Alpha or the generation after, when they become adults, this sprawling, depressing, economically bankrupt garbage that we currently have that looks ugly? I don't think so.
Absolutely.
Definitely not me.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I'll throw my final thoughts up here. I think that sprawl and the gradual spread of cities and urbanization is the scourge, is the blight. And I think that industrial society and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. So my general deal that I want to emphasize is, if you're worried about division on the lower and working classes, keeping them further separated so that it's a burden to talk to the neighbors you want to associate with, keeping them further away so that it's harder to build resilient communities, keeping things spread apart more so that it's harder to build things like, community gardens and go to a cookout or fucking a potluck if you're white. The whole mentality is fucked, and it's fucked us out of a sense of community for a long time. And it's so dumb. because like the more of the city spreads, especially in its present case with the banks, mega corporations and whatever being at the helm of the sprawl, the more it's going to divide us and require that we are increasingly reliant on their technology services, authority, surveillance, security. So my point of all of this is to be very clear that every problem that the right claims to care about and everything that they claim to say is like, something that we should return to tradition away from is something that they are complaining about when we talk about like, solving, when we talk about 15-minute cities. It doesn't have to be the WEF's version. It shouldn't be. Fuck Klaus Schwab, fuck the Malthusians, fuck the globalists, fuck the deep state, and build resilient, close-knit communities. This is the parallel society system y'all are keeping on jacking off about in right-wing circles, and we're talking about that in certain contexts, and what you're really afraid of is that it might also work for your political enemies, the lower class. Because if those people can stand up as well, and they don't require massive co-funding or a bunch of other shit that you got, then they might have just as much or more of a say than you do, and that scares you. It scares the fuck out of you. So, this is your invitation to, if you're scared about this, shut the fuck up. Because you're if you're like truly afraid of the control systems, then fight them now. Stop building the AI with Gab AI and all your other racist bullshit. Stop building, the post-future where you don't have to rely on artists and creatives because you're literally relying on something that jacks their culture, AI. The AI that is also building so that they can surveil us with shot spotters and facial recognition cameras and, face scanners and heartbeat detection systems and all this stuff. All this stuff while they're building like completely reality fucking systems so that they can destroy our sense of reality, much less community, and continually break down and atomize anything that they want to based on that lack of trust, based on whatever propaganda they can generate with their fucking post-future dystopian bullshit. Urban sprawl in a technocratic dystopian metropolis is evil. And you say that whenever you see it in a dystopian fiction movie, but when somebody like me says it, I'm a hippie anarchist commie pinko and you can dismiss me. Well, fuck you. We're divided more than ever, and the further apart we get, the more that division happens for some reason. And then there are all these communities and sub-communities where people are saying, no, I'm from this part of the city. That means I have to hate people from this part of the city. Or I'm from this part of the city. That means that I can look down on people from those parts of the city. And things like that. Like all this shit. It's shit. And it's shit that the elites have used to divide us into heavily controlled districts of their fucking tax farms, their fucking giant prison colonies that they patrol like a prison for some reason. A giant panopticon that they have only enhanced since COVID with all the additional security and social distancing and personal monitoring applications that they installed on your phone. And all this shit is because you're letting them control an ever-broadening, dystopic, empiric reality. And this empire that they are building, that spreads like a virus everywhere. And it's the reason for the war machine. It's the reason your tax dollars are going to Ukraine and Israel. Wake the fuck up and realize you're being played to make their fucking cities for them. Like, make your own decisions in this regard and really fully break away from the paradigm that they've set for you. Because, in the words of Body Count, they can't fuck with us once they realize we're all on the same side. They can't split us up and let them prosper off the divide. Don't fall for the bait and switch. Racism is real, but not it. They fuck whoever can't fight back. But now we gotta change all that. The people have had enough. Right now it's them against us. This shit is ugly to the core. When it comes to the poor, no lives matter. You're the poor. You're the working class. You want to say that you're working for a living? You want to talk about getting your hands dirty? You're on the same class as a bunch of leftists you claim to hate. You shouldn't. We're on the same side. They're fucking us every single day. And until we realize that and unify and fuck them up and get closer knit communities, they win.
Mhm.
So we gotta fuck that shit.
Right.
Smash the state.
Yep.
Smash. So I guess it would be my turn for closing statements. I would like to say that as a cryptid from the woods that doesn't really have to worry about this problem so much myself, I recommend to all of my anarchist brothers and sisters who live in the city and want to regain their freedom to don't wait and start today supplying what your neighbors need and asking from them what you need. Start going to the different people in your apartment building, try to meet them, try to see what they might know, what they might need, what they can do for you, and vice versa, and create communities of mutual voluntary association and business so that we can continually cut the state out of our lives. Who needs the state to design a 15-minute city when you already live within 15 minutes of everything you could possibly need in the terms of human experience and skills? Because I guarantee you a random selection of New Yorkers from like 4 blocks around them, you're going to find a mechanic, you're going to find an electrician, you're going to find a plumber, you're going to find a million different professions that could all service their own people. So if you want to push the anarchist cause, remember the state hates the indoor chicken farmer. The state hates the rooftop gardener. The state hates the private plumber. Do what you can for anyone you can and cut them out of everything you can.
Absolutely.
100%.
With all that being said, can I get a rousing round of smash the fucking state?
Smash the fucking state.
Smash the fucking state.
All right.